Um, Hello, everyone. Welcome. I see many of you are joining, hopefully a little bit more. So thank you for joining today's webinar on private sector engagement. And thank you, those for coming from the private sector, for expressing your interest in our joint action. We are very happy to have you with us today. My name is 𝐏𝐫𝐤𝐯𝐚𝐭𝐞 I work for the communications team of JA PCM, and I'm based in 𝐶𝐚𝐭𝐞 in Belgium. And I'm here with my colleagues from the coordination team and communication team of JA PCM. And I am moderating today's session. And just before we are starting, I just want to go over the housekeeping rules of the online WebEx environment. So just so you know, you are automatically muted and will not be able to unmute yourself. And we ask you to state all your questions in the chat. The chat will be monitored and your questions will be answered in the Q&A session at the end of this webinar. We also ask you to please turn your cameras off if you are not a speaker in the webinar. And just a reminder that this webinar is being recorded and will be published on the JA PCM website. And after this webinar, you can express your official interest via a survey if you are interested to engage with our projects. And finally, just a reminder to the speakers to please stick to your time. So you have about 10 minutes for your presentation of your pilot. So today's session, the first part will focus on the project. So I will give over the word to my colleagues from the coordination team in a bit, who will present the JA PCM project as a whole and inform you what we do and what JA PCM is about. And the second part of the webinar will focus on the pilot projects of JA PCM. So we have several representatives with us today from the pilots who will give you some information on what the pilots do and how you as private sector can engage with the pilot projects. And finally, we have a Q&A in which your questions can be answered. And again, please put your questions in the chat. So I'm now happy to hand over the word to my colleagues from the coordination team. First, to our JA PCM coordinator, Mark van den Bulk, who will welcome you into today's session. And then I will hand over to Nancy and Els, who will present the project.
Yeah, thank you, Lieve, for this kind introduction. And indeed, it's a real honor and a pleasure for me to lead this joint action. It's for myself a long trajectory into bringing personalized medicine into, let's say, our healthcare system. And this joint action in particular is, I would say, the crown on what we've been doing. And I'm very happy to see that so many people and organizations have joined. And now also today, establishing this link between a public initiative and the private sector is something that is really challenging. It's the first time that we're going to do that. We will see where we get. And I would like to thank all the people here in the coordination for preparation of this session, also the partners who give already a lot of input. And it's going to be a process of learning by doing. We have to see where we get. Nobody is really sure where we land, but there is a true will to get somewhere. And I see that there is also a lot of interest. We have 112 slides prepared, so I will not talk too much, but I saw Lieve saying that we will answer all the questions and give answers today. I don't think that may be possible, but please put in your questions in the chat and we will respond to all of them. And the responses to all the questions will be also published. It's like what we're doing for tendering. Okay. We give the floor to Els and Nancy to continue the presentation.
Good afternoon. Do you hear me? Yes. So I will introduce the joint action PCM Project. So go to the next slide. So first of all, what is a joint action? So it's a co-funded project under the EU4Health program, and it involves member states, public level bodies, and also the European Commission to tackle priority health challenges at the European level. So the main aim is to promote cross-border collaboration, to share knowledge and tools and best practice, so that we can achieve a greater impact than national efforts alone. So now I will continue more concretely on the Joint Action Personalized Cancer Medicine, or in short, the JA PCM. So we have a total budget of 31.6 million euro, and it is co-funded with by EU4Health for 25 million euro. So we started in November 2025, and we will continue for 4 years until October 2029. We have an extensive consortium with 151 partners from 29 countries, and it includes several types of organizations, and we built on previous projects, amongst them 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐯𝐬 and PCM for EU. So like already mentioned before, Cienzano is leading this project, and so here is a picture of our team. So we are from the Cancer Center from Cienzano, and so next to Mark and me, we also have Nancy, Anne-Catherine and Anouk, who is involved in our coordination team. So what is the mission and the vision of our joint action? So as a mission, we want to leverage the potential of personalized cancer medicine within Europe by increasing access to and knowledge of PCM in Europe. As a vision, we go for a comprehensive, person-centered approach, and we address the multiple perspectives. So we go from the healthy individual to the cancer patient and to the survivors. As key action, we want to create an EU-wide network for cross-border collaboration and develop methodologies and tools that can help the member states to give access to personalized prevention, diagnosis, treatment, but also follow-up. 3 main objectives that we have is to first ensure equitable access to PCM across the cancer pathway. Secondly, share data and best practices. And thirdly, build knowledge and capacity among healthcare professionals, patients, and the public. So here you can see a visual of our action plan, and we want to address the patient journey through 3 arms. So arm 1 is personalized prevention, arm 2 personalized medicine, and arm 3 is personalized follow-up and tertiary prevention. And we have 2 work packages for each arm, and these work packages are supported by 1 or more dedicated pilots and also 2 transversal pilots. We have also 7 transversal work packages that support these technical part of the project and the pilots. So in the next slide, you can see the list of the 7 pilots that we have in our project. I will not go to them into detail here, but they will be presented by each pilot lead during this webinar, except for the first pilot. This will not be presented today. Then I will go through the main activities of our joint action. So as technical activities, we go for the readiness and implementation of risk-informed personalized prevention across Europe, and this includes multi-cancer early detection and personalized risk assessments, liquid biopsy implementation throughout the patient journey, and also including EQA, so quality assessment program. Also, we have an activity on molecular tumor boards for complex cases and countries without molecular tumor boards. Another activity is expanding treatment options through systematic evidence generation. We have also digital tools for remote monitoring, self-management and supportive care activity, and an activity on cancer predisposition across the patient journey. Then we have as transversal some activities like developing and providing training for professionals, and also material to inform patients and citizens. We will generate LC tools, create a data infrastructure to offer an HTA framework for PCM. We will have also a PCM evaluation framework developed that will address equity, impact, adoption and scalability. We will formulate policy recommendations on sustainable implementation, and finally also a roadmap on PCM in Europe, aligning with parallel activities. So these are the main activities of our project, and then I hand over now the word to Nancy, who will talk more about our private sector engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Els, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to present you indeed the private sector engagement, the proposal that we have today. So, but first of all, I'd like to briefly introduce you how we actually plan the development of the pilot activity within the JA PCM. This development has been developed in 3 phases at this stage. The first phase was the expression of interest that we started before the launch of the project. Where we ask all the consortium members to express their interest in participating to one or several pilot activity. The second phase, pilot definition and planning, is the phase we are currently in progress, where based on this expression of interest, the pilot lead investigate this pool of participants through, for instance, survey to understand the expectation, but as well the technology readiness of the different sites. And based on these surveys and results, they will be able to elaborate and structure the activity, and in addition to attribute to align with define the contributing side to as well observer role. The third phase will be the execution and implementation that is expected to start in early 27. Next, again. So then it came actually quickly clear for us during the early phase of the discussion that we face actually practical constraint. We collected a high rate of interest, expression of interest. For some of the pilot, we have up to 50 institutions that are actually interested to one pilot activity. And this high interest actually exceeds, the demand exceeds the EU4L budget in terms of pilot scale up, but as well in capacity building. And as well, it's need or ambition, the ambition of the project. So therefore, to bridge the gap, we are seeking support, we are seeking engagement with the private sector, and this actually initiates this activity that we are launching today. Yeah, so therefore the scope of collaboration that we are currently proposing has really 2 main objectives. First of all, the immediate need in terms of supporting the JA PCM pilot activity to targeted contribution. It is important to highlight that this contribution should be delivered within the project timeline, but as well align with the absorption capacity that have the pilot. Then we as well foreseen a second objective that is a more long-term objective, where we would like to break the silo between public and private PCM stakeholder to expand the uptake, reduce the deployment disparity across Europe, and leverage new collaboration in the field of PCM. Today's webinar, we will focus on the foundation of this collaborative activity with the basic of this memorandum that we are suggesting with the private sector for engagement with the project. We as well will highlight some timeline and next steps, and then, as it was already mentioned, we will invite all the pilot lead to express and present the collaboration opportunity that they have so far. But first of all, let's move to the memorandum and with the private sector engagement. So this memorandum will flag actually two main aspects. First of all, a proposal for the collaborative framework. I'm insisting that is a proposal. At this stage, it covers some advantages, the scope of collaboration, and some aspect for the modality and the timeline. And then there is another section that is more illustrating briefly the different immediate contribution that the project is actually foreseeing. Let's actually look in more detail for some of the aspects. First of all, what JA PCM can offer. First of all, we have access to a large PCM European network. Has it been mentioned by else? We have 151 partners across the 29 countries within the project. We cover medical care organization, research organization, public and governmental body, professional network, and patient organization. We have as well a large connection with parallel EU initiatives. To cite some of them, we talk about UNET CCC for Comprehensive Cancer Network, the Gen2 initiative that is for the network of expertise where you can find an omic network, and as well the ECAN Plus that is actually leverage all digital infrastructure and capacity around the cancer. We as well offer a very large visibility on the evidence that will shape Europe cancer policy. We are foreseeing a very flexible engagement with the private sector. We are not only targeting big pharma company, but we are as well interested to collaborate with startup, biotech, small charitable company, consulting firm, and so on. We will offer as well a visible and lasting recognition on any support that we could receive. And we will offer a first access to the landmark funding that the project will actually deliver. Finally, I think it's important to mentioning has it as well part of our action plan. We want to contribute to the full continuum of the patient, and therefore we will contribute directly to the patient that need it the most. In addition, what are we foreseeing at this stage that your contribution will deliver? It will support us to advance the evidence base for health technology assessment and reimbursement. For instance, it will support us to generate harmonized multi-country real-world evidence to accelerate the reimbursement decision across Europe. It will as well support us to shaping EU-wide policy and clinical guidelines. It will reduce disparity and building capacity across Europe, extending, for instance, the access to molecular profiling, facilitating knowledge and technology transfer, creating replicate model, for instance, for the supranational MTB, ctDNA implementation, or even digital survivorship tool. Finally, it will deliver as well direct patient benefit across the full cancer continuum. Indeed, we would like really that JA PCM create this shift from a reactive to a preventive cancer care to better treatment selection and improve survivorship. Of course, all of the points I just mentioned are the beginning of a collaboration, and indeed, on a case-by-case basis, according to the support and the pilot activity, additional support and inputs and outcome could actually be available. Regarding the scope of the collaboration, it is a preliminary proposal. We would like that the frame of this collaboration stay in a pre-competitive environment and it align with the grant agreement under the EU4Health program and applicable regulatory requirement. The memorandum as well expand a little bit on the expectation in terms of collaboration from both stakeholders, from JA PCM consortium, but as well from the private sector. It's important to flag that we would like that this respect the independence of the public interest mandated of the consortium and its member institution, and that the collaboration as well comply with all applicant legal, ethical, and regulatory framework. Regarding the data, intellectual property, and secondary use of governance, this will probably be discussed on a case-by-case basis because different pilots have different needs. Finally, on the memorandum, you will as well find the beginning of a vision, a national vision for long-term public-private partnership. We would like to invite today the private sector to really co-shape the PCM future in Europe by contributing to this memorandum and extending the partnership beyond the JA PCM project. Where you will find all this information, our communication team is actually working actively to put in place through our website the JA PCM private sector platform, where you will find shortly the memorandum, the recording of this webinar in addition of the slide deck. You have access as well to express your interest if you want to contribute to this activity. We would like to invite you to express your interest through this form, and then you have access here that you can access here by the QR code. This QR code as well will be available on the website. And on the website from September, you will as well find the different contribution need and link for you, for the private sector, to submit a proposal. Where you can find it exactly on the website, this will be available in the About section, where a private sector page will be available. Then regarding the timeline, today we are launching all this activity with the webinar to start the discussion with the private sector and collect your feedback to see how you foresee this collaboration. We are launching as well the private sector expression of interest. We will organize early July 2nd a follow-up meeting to explain a little bit more in detail the contribution procedure. And then from September, the different submission for the contribution proposal will be available through the platform and the form available on the platform. And then, like I was already mentioned, the pilots will be launching progressively from January 27. If you want to stay in contact or you have questions, so feel free to contact us through our main email address. You do as well. We can follow us on different networks, social network as well. And then here you have as well the web page. You can as well, if you like, register to our newsletter. But now let's move to a more important aspect of this webinar today. It's to dig a little bit deeper on what are the immediate collaboration opportunity across the JA PCM aspect. So first of all, we do have different category that we put in place. So there is medical and product and cancer treatment, next generation sequencing covering germline, liquid biopsy and tissue biopsy testing. We do as well a topic on digital tool and solution, but as well we are forcing collaboration on consultation through survey, workshop and different activities. And without any further ado, I will give back the floor to my colleague Liv that will moderate the presentation of the different pilots.
Yes, thank you very much, Nancy, Elsa, and Mark, for introducing the projects. So now we are going over to the second part of this webinar, which is 6 presentations on 6 different pilots within JA PCM. And we have all the leads or co-leads with us today who will be presenting that for you. So we will be starting with the pilots and use cases of work package H8, which will be presented by Lieve Vagering, from Oslo University. So I'm now giving the floor to Lieve, and you can take over from here.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I'll present the first pilot. It's a pilot on the data sharing platform, and then we also have 2 use cases that I also will present, which will generate the example of how this platform can be used. So next slide, please. Yeah. So the background, we did a mapping within several of the projects on the implementation status on precision cancer medicine in Europe, and it is clear that Europe has come quite far and has a lot of progress the last couple of years in access to advanced diagnostics and also implementation of molecular tumor boards within the public healthcare system. So what we've seen is that we've reached the next major barrier for implementation of precision cancer medicine, and that's access to treatment. So in this pilot, we will tackle one of the big challenges facing decision makers that give access to this treatment, and that's the access to data to support these treatment, the implementation decisions. So we know from experience that Europe has quite a unique advantage with a large population, but within EU we have 450 million people, and we also have a long tradition for high quality health registries and a long tradition to follow patients throughout their entire patient care pathway. So we are well positioned to develop such a system for collecting data and provide data analysis in a more systematic manner than we are doing today. So the aim is to leverage our strength within Europe to build a continuous evidence generation system that can support a learning healthcare system for implementation of precision cancer medicine. So the next slide, please. Yeah, so this is shortly saying that we know from experience that molecular tumor boards across Europe are using and collecting data, and we know that the data exists. We know that the patients exist, but we are missing that collaboration, the true collaboration, for implementation of precision cancer medicine, where we share and aggregate this data. Next slide, please. So the pilot that will establish this data sharing platform is led by ACC in Italy with Ruggero De Maria and co-led by Oslo University Hospital. Next slide. And then we have a use case which is on expansion of treatment space to use this data within this data sharing platform to design cohorts relevant for external stakeholders. And next slide, please. And lastly, also a use case on managed entry agreements, which are more designed towards payers and implementations decisions here. The next slide, please. So the idea here is to build this evidence generation plan and data sharing platform based on the experience we have from several successful European PCM pilots. And I'm talking, for example, the Rome trial in Italy. You have the basket-to-basket trial for Cancer Core Europe, the DRIP-like clinical trials that collaborating within the Primaries network. So we know that we can generate this data, and we know that we can share them across trials and across borders. So the aim here is to move then from these experiences towards more implementing the use of real-world data in a more systematic manners, and here also based on data that our patients that are discussed in molecular tumor boards, given the recent ESMO recommendation that these that collection of patient data, not just within the molecular tumor board, but also follow the clinical data for these patients for a follow-up period. So using this data then to deliver actionable insights to analyze safety and effect for these different treatment options and for different patients. And we know from these previous experience the importance of using these molecular tumor boards and precision diagnostics that are embedded within the healthcare sector, so that you identify all eligible patients in the region or country that are then discussed in molecular tumor board and can be recruited to these predefined cohorts. So the objective of the pilot and use cases is to develop this evidence generation plan, including the data sharing platform, and to demonstrate proof of concept for cross-border recruitment and analysis of these joint cohorts in a retrospective manner, and then to validate this in a prospective data collection and subsequent analysis of prospective cohorts. So next slide, please. So to do this, we are now working on setting up the data sharing infrastructure. It will be stationed in Italy. And this includes also then discussion around statistical analysis plan, data governance structure, endpoint analysis, how this would look like, and then designing the first proof of concept for retrospective analysis. So what we've done so far is to identify centers and countries that are ready to share the data, that has already existing data collection initiatives that can be shared in a federated manner, and also identified relevant cohorts based on existing data so that we can deliver something relatively soon within this setup. The target population, you can have the next slide. Yeah. So the target population, this you probably know from most of you from the different platform trials we've seen within Europe. These are examples from the latest publication from the DRIP trial, where we of course have a tumor agnostic target population, identifying patients based on the cohort, indication and biomarker and treatment. However, using that to do more specific analysis on specific cohorts defined again by biomarker and indication and treatment type. Next slide, please. So work going on now, as I said, is also to identify which analysis will be relevant for this retrospective analysis. That, of course, depends on data already existing in the different national and regional data collecting initiatives. And then furthermore, go into dialogue regarding relevant prospective cohorts. And again, here we're talking about both what's relevant seen from a market authorization holder, but also from a payer perspective. And then this pilot will go on for the whole project period. Perfect, thank you. So what we've done so far, this is just a work plan, and you can see for the first year we started working on the endpoints. This was submitted to as an abstract to ESMO, where we've gone through what's already the experience from existing platform trials in Europe and what's also on a global stage. And then we aim to develop this evidence generation plan that describes this more thoroughly, and we will submit this to EMA. We have a meeting with them tomorrow for scientific advice, and then also go into dialogue with different stakeholders. And this is also an alignment strategy to not just align across with external stakeholders, but also across EU projects. So there will be a workshop in June with UNET CCC and several of the other projects like 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐯 to see if we can again be aligned on this endpoints and data collection from molecular tumor boards. For the data sharing platform, we've looked at the different centers that have expressed interest of participating and selected the first and second wave based on the maturity regarding ability to share their data. So the first wave will be all centers that do collect data from before and are ready to share this data so that we can initiate the retrospective analysis, and then we'll onboard new centers in a different waves to ensure that we can also have the capacity to onboard securely. And this is, of course, will require some standardization and harmonization towards OMO probably. Furthermore, we have a discussion on, go back one slide, please. Yeah, so one of the also important discussions is on governance structure for this data sharing platform, which will, of course, will be interested to discuss also with industry partners, because that will be important. For the retrospective analysis, as I said, we have already conducted a survey to see what data is available already to do the retrospective analysis, and the next discussion will be also again opening for collaboration on the to choose a retrospective cohorts, and here again also we have a discussion with payers. And for the prospective cohorts, we are then initiating discussion with the industry partners and also with payers to see what's relevant to collaborate on. Yes, I think we can go to the next slide. So it's a quite, as Nancy also said, there's a lot of interest in this joint action. So we have also received a lot of interest for this work package specifically, and also these pilots. So there's a large number of expression of interest in a number of countries. For the pilot, we've selected for the data sharing initially to onboard Italy. They will host the data sharing platform, and then Norway, France, and the Netherlands. And then again, we will onboard multiple sites in second and third wave. And this wave implementation is based on readiness to share data from existing data collection initiatives. Next slide, please. Yes, so here is, of course, an important topic regarding the private sector engagement. And given that this is based on experience from existing project and also moving forward into more implementation, it's important for us to get input on the evidence generation plans, especially the endpoints, the statistical analysis plan, etc., to ensure that we're building a system that fits for decision makers both in public and private industry. And parallel to this dialogue with industry, of course, also then reach out to several of the different payers and also, as mentioned earlier, with the regulatory authorities. In addition, for the retrospective and prospective cohorts, the discussion on the choice of cohort is relevant, of course, limited by what's already existing of the data collection, but what's relevant both for the analysis and for cohorts of interest. And then cohort design for prospective cohorts is relevant to discuss with industry. And here, in experience, I think we invite industry partners also to one-to-one meetings. We can have both online or face-to-face. For example, at ESMO is usually a good point for discussion on what's relevant from your side also. Next slide, please. Yes, so expected outcomes of the collaboration and impact. I mean, for us, it's important that we are designing an evidence generation plan that's of interest also for industry, because access to treatment is a public-private partnership. And as said, we also have a close collaboration with payers, especially regarding managed entry agreements, because we know from experience that predictable and regular data analysis is an important part of being able to support such to support managed entry agreements, and also to provide updated analysis of new treatment. And again, thinking of what we can do within Europe to try to build a more learning healthcare system, enabling implementation of new drugs with more uncertainties early, and then knowing that you can have subsequent analysis to improve knowledge regarding safety and efficacy of these new and innovative drugs. So increased uptake of new and innovative drugs is important. And we also would like to see and support more tumor agnostic, not just approvals from a regulatory and a payer's perspective, but also uptake and of these into actual use and access to patients. You know, there's a lot of impact. I think, especially for patients, this is access to more treatment options is important. And can we again do something using this integration of molecular tumor board and diagnostic within a public healthcare system where we reach a lot more patients, so that we can increase treatment options also for rare cancers. And for HTA and payers and clinicians, is this building a learning healthcare system that we can provide structured and iterative data analysis, so that we're not just enabling implementation of new drugs, but that we also get updated information later. And I put an example here that I saw just before this weekend, a publication regarding the world first tumor agnostic reimbursement of immunotherapy in Australia that was biomarker and indication independent. And here again, the authors, Sahar, which also is a co-lead on the use case of managed entry agreements, argue that, you know, it's quite doable from a payer's perspective to provide these types of reimbursement. However, it should always be correlated with data collection, so that we can provide better treatment recommendations later. And then, yes, as I mentioned, we have a dialogue with EMA. We also have dialogue with different payers. We had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with the payers in France, and also will submit this evidence generation plan and have these discussions with payers in different countries to ensure again that we aligned on their needs regarding output of such a data generation plan. And the next slide, please. Yes. So again, we are building on the experience from several precision cancer medicine pilots that we know we can merge data, we know we can aggregate and do data analysis. So we will then do this in a more structured manner through member state collaboration, that we can implement a protocol that are relevant for different types of stakeholders, and that we can provide prospective data collection and analysis to also support industry decision makers. Thank you.
We are now moving on to the second presentation of today, which will be given by Raymond Feyneman from the Netherlands Cancer Institute and Klaus Andersen from Aarhus University, who will present the transversal pilot on LB-ctDNA.
Thanks. Thanks for the opportunity to look for the private sector engagement in the liquid biopsy ctDNA pilot, which aims to implement ctDNA guided decision making across the patient journey. You can hear me well, correct? Yeah. So the ultimate goal is more cure and better care for patients with cancer. And what does it take to get there? Sorry, there's multiple clicks on this one. So for that, we need better surveillance and better treatment. And to achieve that, we need better diagnostics. And today, if we think of which diagnostics is reaching the clinic, then ctDNA molecular diagnostics is truly very close to implementation, or actually in some aspects, it is currently implemented. So implementing ctDNA guided decision making is key and is what we aim to do in this pilot. Next. So in this pilot, I'm the linking pin to arm 2 and work package 7. Klaus Andersen is the linking pin to arm 3 and work package 10. And there's a lot of other connections and a lot of other people involved from within this joint action initiative and peripheral activities and societies, like for instance the European Liquid Biopsy Society, led by Klaus Pantel. For EUNet CCC, lots of interactions with LIVE, who you just heard discuss work package 8 pilots, the SPARK project, the CANDLE project that deals with the data. And then in terms of the work packages, work package 11 deals with the external quality assessment, and work package 13 with the health technology assessment and the data. Next. So we aim for extending access to and knowledge of liquid biopsy ctDNA molecular diagnostics across Europe. And to do so, we want to implement ctDNA testing to guide treatment selection, meaning that you apply ctDNA for mutation profiling, for treatment escalation, but also de-escalation and recurrent surveillance, applying ctDNA as a marker to detect minimal residual disease, and to guide treatment response monitoring, where ctDNA is applied to look for dynamic changes of ctDNA levels over time. Next. So we think in terms of the patient journey, in this case starting with when the patient is diagnosed with cancer, and the key questions to address in the end are who to treat, how to treat, and when to adapt this treatment. Next. And so looking at the clinical applications, the MRD and surveillance part are key to work package 10 and arm 3, and the treatment selection and the response monitoring are key to work package 7 and arm 2. Then if you wonder how then to frame ctDNA in context of mutation profiling, I think it's best summarized in moving from tissue-only diagnostics to also including the plasma diagnostics, in particular when tissue is not present and see how we can apply that. And this will be done in a pan-cancer setting. For the minimal residual disease setting, we try to move from the current TNM staging to include blood, so moving to TNMB. And here we will build upon randomized controlled trials that are up and running in Europe, driven by Klaus and by me. And in the response monitoring setting, we aim to move from the CT scan-based RECIST to ctDNA RECIST. So determining when to adapt to treatment using the ctDNA changes, and here building upon the randomized controlled trials that are currently ongoing and driven by Karen Liese-Spindler. Next. And in terms of implementation, there are several levels that one needs to keep track of. One is the technical level, where you need to think of using scalable and sustainable ctDNA assays that meet IVDR and suit the clinical purpose. And suit the clinical purpose means what are then the test requirements that are needed for certain applications. For instance, for the MRD setting, this is being explored and defined in the IHI project Guide MRD. And these kind of guidelines are also discussed in societies like the European Liquid Biopsy Society to set the standards and define which assays are suited for which applications. The laboratories must all participate in the EQA, which is organized from Work Package 11. From the clinical perspective, ctDNA results must be discussed with clinical teams, for instance in the molecular tumor boards, and then used to guide decision-making. And then we need to demonstrate clinical utility across the patient journey, for which we need to perform health technology assessments. And because this complexity of the health technology assessment across the patient journey, covering all of these aspects, we selected one type of cancer here as the key one, and that is in this setting colorectal cancer, because this is where we have the best connections to the currently ongoing randomized controlled trials, and then are best able to transpose to a real-world data setting. So when we think of the organizational aspects, trying to make ctDNA testing available, accessible, and affordable, we need to transpose these trials to the national setting by performing member state-specific real-world data studies. And small scale, this is what we will do in this pilot. And we need member state-specific HTA evaluation. We will need to collect data from all of the participating sites, and to make sure that this can happen in a way that we can all work together, we ask and stimulate all participating sites to put their data into the tool that we selected to do so, CBio Portal. And we need to interact with regulatory authorities on the national level, and this will be very diverse across the European countries, and at the EU level. And we will need to do this to discuss the path to reimbursement. It does exist for companion diagnostics. It does not exist for prognostic and monitoring biomarkers. Next. So the expression of interest for the pilot covers more than 51 organizations. A number of those are regionally or nationally already collaborating, and that's why we listed them as participating units. And they span over 21 different countries. Next. If we then split per clinical application, we see that the gene mutation profiling is most furthest advanced across Europe, as we expected. So this is performed in the pan-cancer setting. And actually, there's a number of sites who have truly fully implemented ctDNA testing for mutation profiling. This is not the case for the MRD surveillance and monitoring setting, but also here there's a very high interest from many organizations and many countries to participate in these clinical applications in the pilot studies. Next. So we performed a survey, and we identified the sites that have a very high readiness level sites that have a medium readiness level, and sites that have a relatively low readiness level. And based on this readiness level, we are in the process of defining the roles connected to the tasks of each of these sites, where the high readiness level sites can actually prepare the educational material and provide the examples for the low readiness sites and the medium readiness sites. And the medium readiness sites are actually the sites that are not too far from implementing ctDNA testing. But for these sites, it is incredibly important to actually also have access and funding for performing ctDNA assays to really be able to hands-on perform. Next. So this is, I think, key for the meeting today and for our request to the private sector to be engaged in the liquid biopsy pilot. We welcome any industry contributions to enable and facilitate sustainable and scalable solutions for implementing ctDNA testing. And among the key opportunities, I think it's really the expansion of sites who can truly hands-on work with ctDNA and from there participate in this pilot, build on gathering the data, validity studies, utility studies, HTA, and the path to reimbursement. Next. So how can this look like? What are then examples of the different components that we are looking for from industry? I think the most expensive part and essential part is ctDNA assays, which must be suited for the task at hand, for the intended use. So they may differ a lot for the MRD setting, the mutation profiling setting, and the response monitoring setting. But for all of these, we need a number of assays that can actually cover these clinical aspects. But then there is, on the more technical level, for instance, the examples of the collection tubes for blood that preserve the white blood cells, the cell-free DNA extraction kits and equipment, access to different sequencing technologies. In the clinical part, the support for initiation execution of clinical studies, support for data collection and integration. And when it comes to the organizational and regulatory path, it's important that the private sector is also involved as one of the stakeholders in the community to be on the table and discuss the steps that are needed for the path to reimbursement. We will need support for additional health technology assessment, and we need to think which partners could help to enable reimbursement. So, for instance, partners like health insurance companies or other parties that could be of help in this aspect. Next. So we are thinking how to structure the liquid biopsy pilot, and I show you this example to illustrate the thinking frame where we are in. Basically, vertically, you see the 4 clinical applications: the MRD, the surveillance, the mutation profiling, and the monitoring that will each span technical, clinical, organizational, regulatory, data, and HTA components. And now we have this overview of the participating sites who expressed an interest, which means that from each of these sites, we will ask contributors to participate in these technical, clinical, regulatory, data, and HTA activities. But it also means that for the different contributions from industry, there will be a framework in which your product or your services can be positioned. And based on the overview that we have in terms of the low, medium, and high readiness sites, which of the sites are most of your interest back and forth to connect to and see how your products might help these sites to bring ctDNA steps further in the path to implementation. Next. So in the end, what do we expect? We expect ctDNA-guided clinical decision-making to become implemented across Europe. And we hope that we can build an infrastructure for transnational randomized controlled trials in conjunction with member state-specific real-world data studies. In terms of key impacts on stakeholders, we hope to reach healthcare professionals and researchers in terms of training, increase awareness of the clinical utility, and adopt ctDNA for treatment decision-making. We hope to reach healthcare policymakers and decision-makers in terms of education, increasing awareness of regulatory obligations, and to truly make ctDNA testing accessible to patients. And with that, to actually reach the cancer patients and the European citizens to truly achieve more cure and better care at affordable cost. Next. Final slide. ctDNA-guided treatment decision-making is currently already reaching clinical practice, but more clinical applications must travel that path, and that's not necessarily easy, in particularly not for the prognostic and response monitoring biomarkers. And therefore, we will need to play simultaneous chess on multiple boards at the same time, on technical, clinical, and organizational/regulatory level to implement ctDNA-guided treatment decision-making across the patient journey. The joint action does offer the seeds to initiate a coordinated ctDNA joint action across Europe, and we are very pleased to see the expression of interest from so many organizations, and from the interviews we had to see already so much expertise and experience in place. But we must cultivate and leverage this opportunity to succeed, and we love to do so and need to do so in collaboration with the private sector. So if you can and want to contribute, please reach out to Klaus and to me and to the joint action team, and from there we will make sure that you are connected to the right people in this liquid biopsy pilot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raymond, for your clear presentation. We're now moving on to the third presentation, which will be presented by Jeroen van Rooij from Erasmus Medical Center and Marianka Smits. They will present the polygenic risk scores pilot. So over to you.
Yeah. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, great. Yeah, thanks for hosting. This is the third talk, so you're going to start to see similarities between the different presentations, especially the one that you just saw. We're staying on the topic of DNA, but now not circulating DNA, but looking at germline DNA variations that give rise to susceptibility of different cancers. So this would be in healthy people that are not sick and maybe don't get sick, but we measure their genetic predisposition to common cancers to guide screening and early detection advice. We call these polygenic risk scores. So these are a combination of a range of different DNA variations that together give you a germline genetic score at risk of getting a certain cancer. There's been a lot of research into these, and a lot of countries are looking at implementation and guiding screening advice in healthy individuals with this technology, but it's being a bit fragmented, and we think we can accelerate the implementation and integration of these scores in everyday practice. So next slide. This will be coordinated by myself. I'm based at the Erasmus Medical Center in the Netherlands. I'm an assistant professor together with Marianka Smits from the Cancer Institute in Amsterdam, supported by our respective teams. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, so what we decided to do is focus on one specific type of implementation, and this is the polygenic risk score for breast cancer integrated into the CanRisk prediction tool. In a moment, I'll show you details on the study design exactly, but that's where we're focusing because it's the most advanced application of such a PRS used in clinic at this moment. We want to then pilot this protocol that we generated with information from all of the candidate partners. They will tell us where they are currently in implementing these scores. We'll try to harmonize that and then test some of these protocols or decisions in the protocols in real life settings, compare and see if that can give us advice or a kind of harmonized protocol to then guide all of the other countries and participating partners to implement these scores as well. As was said at the beginning, we cannot accommodate everybody, but we hope that doing this two-step kind of approach with some institutes doing the piloting, other institutes observing, but then using the materials is still the maximum way to reach impact. So we'll provide guidance specifically on breast cancer PRS and CAN-risk integration, but of course we think that the same kind of protocol can be adapted to other common cancers, also other implementation settings, for example, directly in screening rather than in hospital or academic centers. And there is some variation between the piloting countries in how they are approaching this. So there will be comparisons on different types of implementations happening as well. Next slide, please. So this is the targeted intervention that we're doing, really to focus the kind of whole application implementation procedure. We'll be using the polygenic risk score 313, consisting of 313 germline DNA variants, which can be measured in one individual, transferred into a score, which is compared against the reference population. And then this Z-score is integrated in CAN-risk to give an overall risk estimate for the person in front of you. And then that can be used to tailor it to the population screening advice that already exists in most countries. So not disrupt too much, but add this genetic predisposition score into the everyday practice. We're asking piloting sites to include at least 100 healthy adult relatives of breast cancer patients, and then particularly look at patients in families where there is an enrichment of cancer happening, but not BRCA1 or BRCA2 mutation carriers, because we've seen there that you should usually advise all of the family members to go for more advanced screening. So we're more in this intermediate group in the Netherlands, that's CHEK2 families, where the risk is increased in family members. The variant itself, the CHEK2 variant, doesn't explain the whole picture. So adding this genetic score leads to reclassification of screening advice in healthy women. And to be able to participate, each pilot site had to be able to include 100 such women within the 2 years that we expect to run, although details are ongoing as we are setting up this study in line with the timeline you saw on the first talk. You can go to the next slide. This is a visual representation of what I just explained. The bar on top is showing work package 6. This is where everybody who expressed interest is included. Everybody can provide information on where they stand with this kind of PRS implementation. We'll harmonize this as much as possible into some kind of protocol and then offer this to the pilot sites that will do pilots to see what they can use, where there are differences, to set it up in such a way that we can systematically compare and learn from it all together. You see that there's different steps that they will have to go through: recruitment, measuring the genetic variants, integrating it into CAN-risk, and then reporting the summarized result back. So we hope to learn from that. That leads to an updated protocol, which can be used to then start implementing clinically in the piloting sites. It can help to set up implementation studies in those sites where we couldn't fund the full protocol at this moment, which would have to happen outside of the project or in collaboration with other activities. And then next to implementing it for breast cancer, also trying to enhance the readiness for other cancers that might follow the same route, or so we hope. You can go to the next slide. So similar to the slides that you saw before, we received expression of interest of 50 different participating institutes from 18 different countries. We asked them through a survey how ready they are with this whole implementation procedure, if they were following the same implementation pipeline using the PRS in CAN-risk, which is not always true, so there's some variation. And we're currently picking, at the moment, 7 to 9 piloting sites from probably 5 countries. And this is constrained by the budget, so that's what we're puzzling at right now. As I said, these countries and institutes will do the piloting, but everybody else will learn from the experience that we gain, and will have access to the materials that we use to set up these studies in the smaller set of pilot sites. Next slide, please. So then to the private sector, it's a bit of a busier slide, but you can read through it. A large part of the engagement with the private sector will be in the germline genetic measurement. This is also where the bulk of the budget for the pilot study is, and there's basically different ways of doing that. Some do sequencing, some do genome sequencing, some have panel sequencing where these PRS variants are included. Some people use genotyping arrays, and the costs are different between those platforms, but also the sensitivity and specificity in detecting certain DNA variations can be different, and they can be easier or more difficult to use in different implementation settings, for example, clinical genetics versus directly into a screening program. And this is something that we have to work out. So right now we asked each pilot institute, how will you do it? And can we facilitate that in this pilot study? But ultimately we want to do side-by-side comparisons and come up with advice also on which technology to use in which population or implementation setting. And for that, we need more information. We need side-by-side comparison of the different options, both in performance, but also in what they cost. Can they be enhanced over time? Can they be integrated into these clinical decision-making tools? How far are we in doing that? And can industry or the private sector support us in doing that? And similar to what was mentioned in the last talk, the whole reimbursement route and how it's going to be reimbursed is a discussion we also need to have together with the work packages in the project. So this is where we would like to collaborate. If you're interested, reach out. But these were some of the suggestions that we thought of when we were setting up this pilot. But we're open to other suggestions also if people see space for that. Then the next slide. Yeah, so this is what we expect to come out of this, mostly a summary of what I showed. So these comparisons of technologies, which we are currently not able to do because we want to include as many countries as possible. So restricting the number of comparisons you can do within one country. More clarity on the different options and what it means for reimbursement and integration into clinical tools. And then ultimately, we think this will help us as researchers and healthcare professionals in using these tools and provide better healthcare to our citizens. The citizens themselves, of course, because I think it's good to know if you're at risk for a certain cancer and can have more accurate screening and prevent them from becoming patients, hopefully, if that's possible, as well as the policymakers and you in the private sector for bringing this new technology into everyday practice, increasing a market of a lot of potentially currently healthy people in which a predisposition might exist, and we might want to measure that. So we're starting relatively small, but we think the opportunity to scale up is quite large if we can do so in a kind of cost-effective, supported manner. And we need your input on that also. Then the last slide, I think. Yeah. So to conclude, within the project, we'll work on harmonizing this implementation protocol and using it for breast cancer, but try to facilitate its use for other cancers in the future as well. And then a subset of partners will try it out and give us lessons learned by the end of the project that we can take along with that. And we're happy to collaborate with whoever is interested and can contribute to this. So please reach out to me. I see I didn't put my email here, but I think the slides are circulated and I can drop it in the chat if people want to do that. But happy to discuss further. And that was it for me.
Thank you very much, Jeroen. Just a reminder that you can also post your questions in the chats and they will be answered during the Q&A. We're moving on to the fourth presentation, which will be given by Matt McQuarrie from the University Hospital of Würzburg in Germany, and he will present the transversal pilots on the CPS compass.
Yep, great. Thanks, Lisa. Everyone can hear me? Seems like, okay, cool. So yeah, similar to Jeroen's presentation about polygenic risk scores, we're in a similar context here, looking at cancer predisposition syndromes and specifically germline genetic testing to identify these syndromes. We're working with technology that is very well established, and we have a good use case. This is mostly an implementation question that we're evaluating in this pilot. So the context here is that up to 18% of cancers in pediatric, adolescent, and young adult, or 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐯𝐚 patients, are estimated to be derived from a germline cancer predisposition syndrome. This, of course, presents opportunities for targeted management in treatment and survivorship scenarios in particular, but we can only realize these opportunities with accurate and efficient diagnostics. And if you click through, we've done in a previous project, 𝐏𝐫𝐤𝐯𝐚𝐭𝐞 we led a use case focused on pediatric acute lymphoblastic leukemia, which found that about half of germline cancer predisposition syndromes would not have been identified using current screening first approaches, in which germline testing to confirm a cancer predisposition syndrome is only offered to patients with significant family history or significant clinical signs that are typically linked to predisposition syndromes. So this suggests significant diagnostic advantages to a genotype first approach in which all cancer patients at diagnosis are also given germline testing. And the question that we're seeking to evaluate and answer in this pilot is, what does it look like to actually implement this genotype first approach at scale in multiple contexts around Europe? Next slide, please. So this pilot is being led by us at University Hospital of Würzburg, myself, as well as Professor Anke Bergman and our team, and we are co-led by Cienzano and Professor Helene Poirel and Dr. Valeria Ferreira. Next slide. So the mission of our pilot is to build capacity for efficient diagnostics for cancer predisposition syndromes, as well as relatedly access to timely genetic counseling, to expand possibilities for personalized treatment and care across the patient journey. Click through, please. Then we have two key objectives here. The first is to evaluate the feasibility and cost effectiveness of a genotype first approach to cancer predisposition syndrome diagnostics performed at diagnosis, and this will focus specifically on the childhood and adolescent young adult population. And we also have an objective related to genetic counseling, but I'll focus today only on objective one because this is where the biggest opportunity and need for industry support lies. Next slide, please. So what our pilot will look like in a broad sense is that for all sites that are included, we'll evaluate first the current standard of care, which for all included sites will be this screening first approach that I mentioned previously. We'll look at diagnostic timeframes from patient presentation until the finalization of the diagnostic workup, usability from the perspective of both clinicians and diagnostic staff, as well as the all-in cost per patient. And then we'll enter our implementation phase, where we'll implement a genotype first approach pan-cancer in 50 pediatric and adolescent young adult patients per site, looking once again at diagnostic timeframes and the all-in cost per patient, as well as the psychological impact of germline genetic testing performed at diagnosis in this population. Then following the implementation phase, we will have a debrief where we'll look once again at usability, this time for the genotype first approach in both clinicians and diagnostic staff. And then we'll also look at barriers to implementation of this genotype first approach, as well as some secondary analyses of germline genetic data, which were captured prospectively in the course of this pilot, as well as retrospectively contributed from some partner institutions. And then we'll have a 6-month follow-up time point looking at the longer-term psychological impact. And so we have received expressions of interest from 20 sites representing 14 institutions across 10 countries. I think the main pitch to you today as potential industry professionals, industry collaborators rather, is that with EU funds only, we can conduct a relatively limited pilot. So if you click through to the map here, so if we're only using EU funds, we can include 4 implementation sites, 2 from Southern Europe, 1 from a capital city and 1 from a regional area, and 2 from Northern Europe, 1 from a capital city and 1 from a regional area. However, with private sector collaboration, these possibilities for implementing this genotype first approach and evaluating the implementation more broadly are greatly enhanced. So next slide, please. And so this is what this could look like. So we go from 4 institutions to 10. And then additionally, we have the opportunities for a much broader demographic coverage as well. So in the EU funds only version of the pilot, actually you can keep going to the next slide is okay. Yeah, perfect, thanks. So in the EU funds only version of the pilot, we restrict ourselves to the pediatric context to reduce heterogeneity in a relatively limited number of sites. So we'd focus only on the pediatric context. And from previous patient loads, which were identified in a survey, we'd also be focusing mostly on patients with leukemia, although we'd be implementing pan-cancer, but most of the patients that we anticipate seeing would be pediatric leukemia. And if we look at the possibilities for an expanded version of the pilot with in-kind support for whole genome sequencing consumables from industry, then we can look at sites that focus distinctly on the young adult context, sites that focus distinctly on the adolescent context or jointly on the adolescent and pediatric context, and then sites that focus exclusively on the pediatric context. And so we have a much broader, not only geographic representation, but also demographic representation with private sector collaboration. So this becomes possible. Next slide, please. And so these are the explicit needs from the pilot. I will say that it's similar to other pilots. We're very open to other ideas and other modes of collaboration rather than just strictly consumables. But our main immediate needs in this pilot are whole genome sequencing consumables to facilitate up to 500 germline whole genome sequencing tests in 10 sites across 7 countries. And to facilitate this is a lower threshold mode of collaboration. But again, we're very, very open. I will note that existing equipment, existing sequencing equipment from Illumina and Oxford Nanopore Technologies is already in place across the majority of included sites. Next slide. Okay, and so yeah, you can go ahead and click through to make all of the bullets appear. I think there's 7 total. Yeah, thanks. So the expected outcomes with industry support, we'll be able to pilot the implementation of this genotype first approach with a much broader geographic and demographic scope, which will enable us on the back end to make more robust and generalizable insights regarding the feasibility and cost effectiveness of actually implementing this genotype first approach in a childhood and adolescent young adult cancer population in a range of European sites and contexts. And in so doing this, we will also increase our capacity to deliver germline whole genome sequencing as part of routine diagnostics for these patients. And so this will have a variety of impacts on stakeholders, including for healthcare professionals and researchers, improved reimbursement and integration possibilities for this genotype first approach, for policymakers, broad feasibility and economic data to inform decisions regarding actually integrating this genotype first approach, for citizens, enhanced possibilities for cancer predisposition syndrome diagnostics, as well as management and targeted treatments related to more efficient diagnostics for predisposition syndromes. And then, of course, for the private sector, using more whole genome sequencing tests provides opportunities as well. And so this pilot will provide data to inform the increased integration into routine cancer diagnostics. Next slide, please. I think this is the last one. Yep. So in short, a genotype first approach has many advantages compared to the current standard of care in most contexts around Europe, which is a screening first approach to identifying cancer predisposition syndromes. CPS Compass will provide insights into the feasibility and cost effectiveness of actually implementing this genotype first approach, focusing on a childhood and adolescent young adult cancer population to inform future integration into diagnostic workflows. And we can really supercharge our pilot in collaboration with industry, and specifically whole genome sequencing consumables would enable us to greatly increase our geographic and demographic breadth, supporting more robust and generalizable results, which then in turn will help us fast track the implementation of a genotype first approach to predisposition syndrome diagnostics across Europe. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity to present. And I also don't have my email in here, but it'll be included in the materials in the portal. So please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. Indeed, we will circulate all the contact details that you will need. We're moving on to the fifth presentation now, which is done by Alejandro Piris from the Valdepon Institute of Oncology, who will present the supranational molecular tumor boards for rare and complex cases.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. To the creation, to the establishment of a supranational MTB, molecular tumor board, for rare and complex cases. Next slide, please. So the main, the mantra of this, or the main important objective of creating this pilot is because until now, to date, patient access to precision oncology and molecular tumor boards in Europe and many other places, but especially we're talking about the European environment, is very heterogeneous and unequal, not only at a country, but also a regional level across all EU member states. Next, please. It's like with the whole team from all of the institutions leading this pilot. From our side, Alberto, myself, Cristina, and Guillaume, and from Institut National du Cancer, Luxembourg, Nikolai, and Mukades, MSCI in Poland, Iwona Lubomska-Izabela Agnieszak, and from �𝐸CO Barcelona, Ernest Nadal. Next, please. So the mission there is to create a sustainable, the idea is to have a sustainable and scalable European framework in which we can, any patient from any European country with a rare or complex advanced solid tumor, regardless the country of origin, can benefit from access to a molecular tumor board, including a biomarker testing and all of the tools and platforms that are composing this MTB, and the molecular interpretation by experts, and of course leading to treatment recommendations and leading to clinical decisions or orientation to clinical decisions through this MTB. The objectives specifically are to create an operational framework at a European level, including all of the SOPs, all of the standardized operational procedures to set out a translational MTB, and to try to expand all of the biomarker access to these sites, all of the participating sites. Also to establish this network that will be, in different layers. We will start by a number of centers, and in the future, we will be implementing, or we will go to second layers in which we will include more centers, more countries. So we will establish a functional network of pilot cancer centers that, in order to implement this, both the adult and a pediatrics MTB pilots, and this will lead to a roadmap not only for the pilot cancer centers to include patients, but also other institutions to onboard on the molecular tumor board. For example, as experts in molecular interpretation and pathologists and all of the professionals that are, should be participating in this kind of platforms. Another important objective will be to define the impact metrics that, very importantly, will lead to sustainability measures, because we want a pilot that will be sustainable long term, and including as many clinical sites as possible. And these metrics will allow to quantify the impact of our MTB, particularly on countries and regions with limited or no access to MTBs. And this will be our proof to demonstrate tangible improvements. Next, please. So the work plan is, as in any of the MTB, we'll have clinical pilot sites that we provide patients through samples, both samples and data. ¿Puedes cerrar? Samples and data or only data to include those patients for the analysis for the selection committee. So we will include a committee with for the selection case plus a virtual MTB experts for experts for the molecular interpretation, and in parallel we will prepare the samples from those patients, and those will be shipped to the molecular diagnostic laboratories that will perform all of the analyses that are needed for the comprehensive study of the data and the sample of the patient that will be discussed in the monthly or the regular boards. Of course, we, as I previously mentioned, we will have both MTBs for adults and pediatrics. For adults, it will be we will include rare and complex cases, and for pediatric cancers, we will include all kind of pathologies, cancer, pediatric diseases, and as an infrastructure, we will come with a strong project management team, plus a data sharing platform that will leverage from the data platform that we have already established for basket of basket study for Cancer Core Europe with the CBio portal. And very importantly, regarding the use of data, we'll have a legal framework that will allow us to include data from all of the patients and to include all of the documents and all of the legal requirements that we need for the inclusion of the patients. We will also have some pilot observers that will mainly include those countries or those sites that have already experience in participating in national MTBs or complex or European MTBs like basket of basket, that will help those novel pilot sites that will participate to they will share their experience and will help to include all of the, to tackle all of the complexities that can derive on the lack of experience on the experts to participate in this kind of MTBs. Next, please. So the pilot geographic coverage is European-wide. We have received a lot of expressions of interest, a total number of sites of 47 institutions and sites from 22 countries. In all of those cases, we requested whether they wanted to participate in both MTBs or only in adult and pediatric. And you can see here the figure that we had most of a majority of the sites that were participated mostly in the adult MTB, but also we have 13 institutions that were expressed interest in participating in both. You can see the map here with the representation of sites that have applied for both MTBs. Next, please. So regarding the private sector engagement, we think this is a great opportunity to have our private partners, our colleagues here present, and we believe that this is a great opportunity for the diagnostic companies and pharmaceutical companies that are interested in the implementation of precision oncology in Europe. And in these early stages in which we will be implementing the different platforms and tools that support the MTB establishment. Also, we think that to make this sustainable, we will have to rely on in-kind contribution from private partners because this is a pilot that we will start with a small number of sites, but the idea is to increase the number if we have more funds. We will include layers of new sites that will be able to participate, and to make it sustainable, we will need in-kind support from private stakeholders, apart from all kind of funds that are can be reimbursed by the European Commission or the member states. So for the private our private colleagues, this will allow a broad and the access to a broad range of molecular analysis, and this will include whole genome sequencing, whole transcriptome sequencing, the possibility of working on companion diagnostics text, and of course the extraction of acquisition of liquid biopsies and its analysis. Also, the pathways that we will establish to enable access to all of the therapies, for example, off-label, compassionate use, or clinical trials. This is very important because we will try to link all of the studies, all of the cases of the patients that will be included. Our idea is to have medical advice on potential clinical trials that can be beneficial for those patients, no matter the site or the country in Europe that in which those clinical trials are being developed. And the same with off-label use or drugs, or through the via of compassionate use for drugs that can be sent to be used for those patients. And of course, clinical trial enrollment will be based on MTB recommendations by the experts. Next, please. So what are globally the expected outcomes and impact of this pilot on MTB, supranational MTB? Expected outcomes will be a validated operational, a validated operational legal framework for supranational MTBs, harmonized standard operational procedures for biomarker testing, case submission, prioritization, discussion, and follow-up, improve access to molecular expertise and biomarker-driven treatment options across Europe, and our global roadmap for scale-up and replication across all EU member states. And the key impacts on the different stakeholders will include healthcare professionals and policymakers, and so access to multidisciplinary molecular expertise, all of the capacity building and shared learning tasks and platforms across all countries. Of course, to improve the clinical decision-making in complex cases globally in Europe. For policymakers in healthcare, the evidence to support cross-border collaboration models, and of course the use of data and the access to data or secondary use of data for these patients that will be stored and can be used for further research, and sustainability and health system impact. For cancer patients and citizens, the impact is obvious. They improve access to precision oncology expertise in other countries, and they reduce geographic inequalities in cancer care. And as I previously mentioned, for the private sector, this will establish common strategies for implementation in health systems and provide visibility and market exposure in the development of all of the tools and circuits and techniques that will be used to test the different samples and implement the procedures for the establishment of the MTB globally. Next, please. So as a conclusion, we want to develop this pan-European approach of work as a solution to reduce inequalities to precision oncology across all Europe. And the aim is the operational, legal, and clinical framework to scale across all EU members. So targeting genomically complex rare and pediatric cancers will allow immediate clinical value to these patients while generating evidence long term and the sustainability of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alejandro. We're moving on to the sixth and final presentation of today, and after that we will have about 15 minutes left for a Q&A session. So the final presentation will be given by Sarah Ball from 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐯𝐚𝐭𝐞, and she will present the Work Package 9 pilot on digital survivorship and care delivery.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yes, so my name is Sarah Ball, and I'm presenting the Work Package 9 pilot, which is focused on as you just said, digital survivorship care delivery. The next slide. So the main rationale behind the pilot and the issue that it is intending to target is one, the rising tide of innovation by the increased number of tools for remote monitoring, supportive care delivery, patient empowerment, and self-management, specifically in the cancer survivorship space. And that there's a large amount of evidence being built in randomized clinical trials, but especially in high-income countries and high-resource centers. But despite this, there's quite a significant implementation lag, as practical implementation and rigorous evaluation of these technologies are lagging behind, specifically among diverse lower resource centers. And additionally, organizational readiness varies significantly between countries and between centers themselves, with gaps in skills, resistance to change, and resistance to implementing new infrastructures. Next slide. So just an overview of the team for the pilot. It's led by Gustave Roussy, by Dr. Marie-Elise Francois, and myself and 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐯𝐚𝐭𝐞 𝐒𝐬𝐫 are also on the team, and it's co-led by Cienzano, by Regine and Marie. Next slide. So the overall mission and vision of the pilot is that it aims to pilot a personalized, multi-level, and multi-dimensional implementation package to accelerate digital survivorship care in diverse clinical centers across EU member states. And it's broken down into 3 primary objectives. So first, to stratify participating sites by their existing survivorship infrastructure, as well as their digital health readiness, and then to tailor the implementation package based on their specific needs. So this stratification was done through a survey. And then second, to evaluate the impact of the personalized implementation package on improving center readiness in the case of low readiness centers, successfully developing digital tools or successfully deploying digital tools in routine care in the middle readiness centers, and finally improving equitable and sustainable digital health pathways in the high readiness centers. And then finally, to illustrate the feasibility of integrating digital tools for survivorship care and its potential benefit in the quality of care provided. Next slide. So it's a lot on this slide, but this is our overall umbrella work plan, and it's broken down into 3 phases of the pilot. So first, in the pre-implementation phase from month 0 to month 24, so this is where we are now. The objective is to prepare organizations to adopt or develop digital survivorship program. So this primarily is going to target the low and middle readiness sites as recipients, and then as well as the high readiness sites as providers of support. And so this will be achieved through site self-assessment and workflow redesign. So mapping the current survivorship care delivery, what are the gaps, what are the current resources, what are the workflows existing at these centers, as well as a digital health readiness assessment through the survey that we conducted. Then survivorship workflow redesign exercise, local workshops, and then we have many planned capacity building activities during this time as well, including webinars, exchange visits between low and high readiness sites to low readiness sites to centers with experienced digital survivorship care, so the high readiness sites, and then sharing documentation of established processes and best practices. So included in the capacity building exercises is a lot of knowledge sharing activities, specifically between the high readiness centers and the middle and low readiness centers. And then finally, the technology, regulatory, and financial enablement of implementing these digital survivorship tools. So connecting sites with technology providers, providing examples of reimbursement and sustainability pathways, identifying and supporting funding opportunities for cultural adaptation, digital customization, and dedicated implementation staff. And then the metrics used to evaluate this will be readiness assessments at month 0 and month 24. So if potentially some of the low readiness sites would be subsequently considered middle readiness after these capacity building actions up until month 24. And then also increased knowledge on digital survivorship opportunities and expected impact, completion of redesigned survivorship workflow, and establishment of partnerships with academic and industry collaborators. So following this pre-implementation will be the implementation phase, and this is primarily focused on the middle readiness sites. So there currently will be 2 middle readiness sites that will actually conduct a cohort study with 100 patients to roll out a selected digital survivorship intervention. And this will primarily be conducted in these 2 sites. They will be submitting the protocol and conducting this cohort study, and then this will be evaluated using the REAIM implementation framework. So looking at reach, effectiveness, adoption, implementation, and maintenance of the digital survivorship intervention. And then finally, in the post-implementation phase, the main players in this will be the high readiness sites, and this will be mainly focused on how can they ensure that the tools that are already existing in their centers can be sustainable and optimized based on what they've learned throughout this process. So next slide. So starting with the expression of interest for the pilot's geographic coverage, we had a total of 19 sites express interest in participation across 12 countries. Next slide. And then based on the expression of interest, we deployed the site selection survey. And from this, we had 15 complete survey responses to be able to analyze, to stratify, and select sites for the pilot. So the 3 main metrics that we used for site stratification and selection were first, the current practice status for 5 key domains of survivorship care delivery. And this was measured on a scale of 0 to 2, 0 being not part of routine practice, 1 partially integrated, or 2 fully integrated into routine care. And these 5 domains included surveillance and follow-up planning, management of physical weight and long-term effects, management of psychological and psychosocial effects, management of chronic comorbidities, and prevention and health promotion. And then related to these 5 domains, the next metric was the level of digital support for the 5 domains. So for each question, they were then subsequently asked what is the level of digital support for each domain on the same 0 to 2 scale, 0 being none, 1 limited or pilot use, and 2 routine care use. And then the final primary part of the survey was the eReady validated digital readiness questionnaire, which primarily looks at institutional readiness for digital implementation. So we used the first 2 metrics primarily to differentiate the high and low readiness centers. And then we use the eReady as a secondary metric to differentiate between the potential middle centers. And so next slide. So based on this site selection criteria, we ended up with 9 total sites in 8 countries. So the high readiness sites were Gustave Roussy in France, ICANN in Finland, Aarhus University Hospital in Denmark, shown in blue, and then the middle readiness, the Bank of Cyprus Oncology Center in Cyprus, and the Chem Institute in Luxembourg, shown in orange, and then finally the low readiness centers were IRCCS, DHIO, the Department of Health Aragon, both in Spain, and then St. Vincent's UCD in Ireland, shown in green. So these were the selected sites, and Gustave Roussy's Gustave Roussy is participating as a voluntary high site, so an unfunded site, and then the other 8 sites are funded by the pilot. Go to the next slide. And so for the private sector engagement, how private sector can meaningfully engage with this pilot, the in-kind contributions are sought to provide participating sites with access to the digital tools themselves for survivorship care delivery, including needs assessment, monitoring, education, and self-management, among others. And so the 2 main kinds of support that we are looking for is 1, in-kind access to the digital tools themselves in the native language of the implementation sites to be used in the cohort studies in those 2 middle readiness centers, but with the overall goal of building a mechanism to sustain the tool into routine care across Europe. And then also implementation support for integrating the tool into routine care, including potentially access to ops teams, user engagement, and interoperability and equity teams. Next slide. And so, as I just mentioned, the types of relevant digital tools that we are seeking in-kind access to categorically include remote monitoring tools, so EPROs and wearables. And this could include symptom tracking, wearable activity or sleep capture, dashboards, alerts, and thresholds. Digital supportive care programs that can include physical activity or rehabilitation, psychosocial support, sexual health, return to work, nutrition, fatigue, and sleep. Educational and informational tools, including potentially AI-enabled chatbots, educational portals, videos, and podcasts, or forms of interactive learning. And finally, care coordination and digital follow-up, including digital survivorship care plan documents, navigation or reminders, messaging, or virtual follow-up appointments. Next slide. And so some of the foreseen benefits of in-kind contribution for this pilot, first and foremost, would to enable additional sites to join the pilot study to access high-quality digital survivorship tools. So of the 15 sites that completed the survey, nearly everyone that was not selected to participate did indicate that they would still be interested if additional in-kind support would enable it. Additionally, to support the accelerated integration of digital health into routine survivorship care across the diverse European ecosystem, and ultimately to improve survivorship care delivery and patient quality of life. And then benefits that we foresee specifically to industry partners would be to be able to demonstrate implementation outcomes across diverse real-world contexts of the tools that you're developing, generate insights on reach, efficacy, adoption, implementation, and maintenance through the re-aim evaluation in the middle readiness centers, increased visibility, value, and market reach in Europe, and enhanced evidence for scalability and real-world effectiveness of these digital tools. Next slide, please. And then finally, the expected outcomes and impact here stratified by the different readiness levels of the centers participating. First, for low readiness centers, to empower them through standardized pre-implementation practices. They'll be receiving the pre-implementation package, including self-assessment, capacity building, and enabling of implementation of these tools. For middle readiness centers, to enable them to effectively implement and evaluate digital survivorships programs through the coordinated cohort study. And finally, for high readiness centers, to support them in sustaining, refining, and scaling advanced digital solutions while sharing best practices for system-wide improvement with the medium and low readiness centers. And then finally, for patients, to improve patient access to evidence-based digital health tools to advance comprehensive survivorship care delivery. Next slide, please. So to conclude, this pilot study will test in real time the results produced through Work Package 9 tasks, including digital ecosystem mapping, requirements, and reimbursement, and implementation, capacity building, and equity through tasks 9.1 and 9.2. The three-phase personalized implementation package is tailored to different levels of center readiness. And then finally, the foreseen pilot outcomes include advancing readiness for low readiness centers, performing an implementation study for a digital health pathway in at least 100 patients in that cohort study for middle readiness centers, and finally to enhance existing digital health pathways among high readiness centers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for your closing presentation. We have now reached the end of all 6 pilot presentations. We hope that everything is clear to you and that it was interesting to listen to. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. And if you have a question later on, you can also email them to us and we will be able to answer them. I will give over the words to Mark, who will provide us with some closing remarks and is there to answer any questions you might have.
Yeah. Thank you, Lieve. Okay, I've seen that in the chat there were some questions, but we could easily answer them, so I think we'll summarize that. I'm sure that there will be a lot more questions. I'm always impressed if I see the presentations on the richness of what we are doing with the pilots. And in fact, one should realize the pilots are for us the drive to make also the link with the work packages. So you haven't heard what is going on in the work package. So I think for the private partners, it may be interesting even to just hear what we're doing there. So it's broader than that. I think the main demand, in fact, from our side is for support from the private sector, is to be able to extend the scope of where we implement the pilots, to make sure that other countries that are not in now, because due to less readiness and need for capacity building to introduce the innovation into their system, but for that you need also more means. So it's really the aim to level inequalities, or to support the leveling of inequalities on having access to these technologies, which is of course not at the level of the healthcare system, but at least to raise the awareness. So that's one thing. It's a partnership that we envisage, so we would like to hear also, we have ideas what could be of benefit for the industry, but we would like to hear also from the industry the return, what they would like to get from us. And that's why in the coming months we will go into a dialogue with you to hear what is possible for you, what is possible for us. We have other partners and the member states, the Commission, that also play a role in deciding how this partnership is. Another thing is, I think several people have already addressed it, this is a joint action that has links to a lot of other joint actions and a lot of other initiatives in the EBCP plan, in the Mission on Cancer, in Digital Europe. So it may be opening a port to a broad scope of activities that is going on cancer in Europe. So it's broader than just here personalized medicine. I think what we would like to learn is how can we work together? How can we set up this? This is a very important thing. And it's indeed, somebody mentioned it, we're looking at the future. It's not just for this joint action, it may be also for the next years, how we're going to develop that. So, but if you have questions, you can send it. And I think Lieve will indicate again how you can do that. I saw a lot of interesting of getting into contact with us. Well, I think the expression of interest is the correct way, and then we can see how we modulate. So I would like to I thank all the speakers because it was really very interesting. The slides will be made available. You will see, I think also for our private sector partners, it's the first time that they see so much details of the pilot, so it will be more clear where you could be interested in. So, and I leave the floor to Lieve now to conclude.
Yes, thank you, Mark, for your closing words, and indeed thank you to all the speakers for presenting the pilot presentations. I'm just showing the slide again with the QR codes which you can scan to express your interest into engaging with the joint action. And this is just a slide with all the contact details and how to stay connected with our joint action. So on the top you see the email address which you can use to send any questions you might have. And we will circulate as well the contact details of the pilot leads and co-leads so you can get directly into contacts. We will send you the details. And you can see their website, LinkedIn, and Blue Sky to stay connected, and you can subscribe to our newsletter. And thank you very much for joining, and we will send you the recording and the slides as well. And have a nice day.